right, Greg Silverman here. Welcome back to another episode of Roadmap to Revenue. I've got Chris Daniele with me today. Chris, introduce yourself and tell everyone kind of where you are and what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Daniele. I'm currently the VP of Digital Analytics at BBDO New York. I'm a part of the marketing science group there, which is an extension of strategy, focused really on the data and insights portion of the agency capability. So it's a fairly new team, maybe about 5 years in its inception now. And I'm one of the leaders on the team in terms of building out data-driven capabilities that lead to creative advertising campaigns, which is quite interesting and unique.
It's the blend of science and art.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't get more blended of science and art than that, right? So,
No. And it's interesting because the last 3 or 4 of these, the term marketing science has really come up quite a bit. Maybe the fourth person in that team or calling it that. Tell us a little bit about how you got to marketing science, because there weren't any degrees in that, were there?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, like I think your topics, the people you speak to, makes a lot of sense in terms of where I got to in my career, because I started out going to college thinking I was going to work in television. TV production was always like a goal of mine to get into. And I spent a lot of my college years filming, editing, working on TV programs, documentaries, school TV station, doing things like that. And I just always was interested in TV. It started really in high school. We had a class that was basically TV production. We had a small studio. It was pretty cool. I got really involved in that. And I was basically like, if I'm going to go to college, which I wanted to, my parents wanted me to, I was like, I might as well do something in this realm, because it's the only thing that I really got excited about. That and gym class. I was an athlete, if you will, as well. So I did, I got my degree in mass communications with a focus on kind of the TV part of it, production, things like that. I did a little writing, I did a little editing. I kind of did a little bit of everything, but didn't really have a particular goal in mind other than I just wanted to work in television. And quite frankly, that first year out of college was hard to find a job. This is back in 2005. So it was a harder road than maybe I envisioned it to start. And then finally, I got a little bit of a break where I got an editing position with a production company near my hometown. And this company actually did TV shows for the Food Network. So I basically was an assistant editor, and I'd come in at 6 p.m. and leave around 4 a.m. Monday through Friday, working on a lot of audio editing work for the programs that this production company was producing, including Paula Deen at the time was pretty popular. That was probably our biggest one. So it was quite a cool experience, just because I always wanted to work in TV. I'm actually editing shows that are being aired, and I have a part of that, and that was pretty cool. But I wasn't being paid a lot of money. I was working these crazy overnight hours, and I wasn't sure where this was going to lead to. I was a little bit not disenfranchised, but my enthusiasm waned a little bit after I had some experience in the business. And I wasn't sure.
I wanted to start a career in music, and I found out what I was qualified for were weekend jobs on AM radio, being the disc jockey.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah. In some ways, when I met some of the senior people in the production house, they were obviously doing what they wanted and enjoying it and had various degrees of success, but it wasn't exactly it didn't strike me as this was the end all be all.
So how did you curve out of that?
Yeah. So ironically enough, I was laid off near Thanksgiving one year. Being that it was a small company, I heard this was pretty typical. Once they kind of got what they could out of a young, entry level person, they kind of moved on or downsized a little bit. But while I was surprised, I wasn't disappointed, because I knew this wasn't going to be the end all be all for me. But at the same time, I had no clue what I was going to do next. Do I go back to school? Do I try something else and so forth. So I was basically in this 4 or 5 month period of uncertainty, just trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do next. And then a friend of mine who had a girlfriend at the time, whose father's friend, I know this is like 6 degrees of separation a little bit, was an executive at a TV spot sales company called Peachtree Media. So they, at the time in 2007, were one of the big agencies for spot TV, or rep firms as they call it, for, I'm trying to explain this properly, it's been a while, but like national local TV sales. So they would represent TV stations across the country and kind of handle their national sales inventory, buying and trafficking and those types of things. So, if you're a station in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and you want to sell some national inventory on your programs, our firm, they were the ones that would facilitate that with salespeople and so forth. But my friend contacted me and said, look, I know you're looking for a job. I heard that they're looking for people at, again, my girlfriend's father's friend's company. He can get you an interview pretty quickly. I said, okay, I have nothing to lose. So I went down. All I really knew that it was like research, and I had no idea what that meant. So I got there and I met what ended up being my hiring manager. Old school guy, had a lot of years in the business, knew the ins and outs of the Nielsen ratings and the TV schedule and all that stuff across the board. And he kind of gave me like a 15-minute kind of overview, asked a few questions, so forth. And I still didn't quite grasp it. I knew Nielsen ratings, I knew what those were, and I knew like we'd be looking up something along those lines. And I left there thinking, okay, maybe. And then like a day or two later, I got the job offer. It was quite a low amount of money, but at that point,
it was better than zero.
Better than zero. So and I ended up commuting from my hometown for a few months, Poughkeepsie, New York. So not far, but it was pretty far enough. And then moving into the city eventually. But I began to establish a career as an analyst. So, really it was like looking up Nielsen ratings, creating like one-sheeters, as we called them, like why Ellen in La Crosse, Wisconsin is the show to buy versus some other station in the marketplace, or whatever the case was. I remember when the Nielsen books came out on, I think, a quarterly basis. That was like the big busy time of year. I even from holiday one time to work on that. So that was really my introduction. And, I liked it. I liked numbers. I thought it was pretty cool. It was, again, being a part of TV, which wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but it was still in that world. And then, my boss really took a liking to me, and he was really helpful and knowledgeable. So I learned a lot from him. And then what happened was what a lot of people experienced. 2008, early 2008 came around, and the economy crashed, and they cut not only my team significantly, but most of the companies. So that said, I was laid off again. And a few months later, I found an opportunity at Media Edge, which is now called Wavemaker. They're part of WPP. They're a media agency in competitive research. So that's really where my agency experience started. And that was like literally learning how to pull. So I knew Excel, I knew Nielsen ratings, but that was really the extent of it. I didn't know a media agency, what they really did. I didn't know the ins and outs of it. I didn't know how what I did, leads to kind of planning and buying. And I even know what those terms really were. I had to learn all of this, the media math of things and stuff. But they basically said, you got a job if you want it, kind of pulling competitive information for AT&T and its competitors. So like, what advertisements are they running? How much are they spending? What's their, impressions, GRPs, that type of stuff, and reporting out on that. So that's really when I got to learn kind of the ins and outs of the media business, specifically on the agency side. So what is planning and buying? What does this all like lead to? How does research in general, contribute to the bigger picture capabilities that an agency has? And then how does my small role, which is like literally pulling things from a software platform and making some insights. Also work with like the real data heavy stuff. There were people on the team doing like taking that information and then running like, you know, programs or queries and databases and all this stuff and interfaces and stuff like that. It was like I was a small piece of a more complex or bigger capability. And it really intrigued me because, you know, I just started to pick up things pretty quickly, and I started like liking it. I started liking the fact that we were working with numbers and that we're looking at like strategic elements of advertising and media that I didn't even know existed, you know, and how you work with not only the other teams in an agency, but the other counterparts you have on a team. They got, you know, the programmers, the data scientists, the managers, the project managers, all that kind of stuff. So I really began to develop kind of an interest and an on-the-job learning on how all that works at an agency. And I was never like one that was like had a statistical background. I wasn't being taught like complex programs or coding or anything like that. But I did pick up things in Excel. Like I learned VLOOKUPs. I learned like macros, things like that. So stuff that like maybe I would have learned in college, or if I got like a master's degree or something. I started to kind of learn on the job to like make myself a little more well-rounded, because quite frankly, when I started, I was just someone who understood directions and was able to kind of follow, and I wanted to kind of evolve from there. So I started to quickly learn that the more you do and the more you pick up, the better your chances will be. Because what I found was the team I worked on there, and this has kind of been the case in most of my stops along the way, and it's not a knock on anybody, but people are a little bit introverted on the research side. They're a little more mild-mannered, not the loudest in the room, maybe don't like the spotlight or don't like to present. And that's not a knock on anybody. I just feel like the analytical minded are quite frankly tend to be more on that side, especially when you're starting out. So I found that like one of my strengths was the ability to not only like learn things and do them, but I was able to kind of relate to people in a way that made it like translatable. You know, even if I wasn't maybe the expert, I was able to kind of take the parts that I understood and then hopefully, you know, make someone else understand it. Like the storytelling nature of
that's
analytics, I think, has always been something I've been excited about. And
it's always been my proposition, Chris. In between data science and pure insights are these analytics process leads who have to see the process and be able to tell a story, leverage those tools, and that's kind of led you to where you are.
Yeah.
A lot of the audience wants to know, what tools did you start using to understand the past, and what tools are you using now to understand the future? Maybe you give us a quick rundown on the kind of inventory of things you've gone from. Certainly, we all started with Excel. I started with Lotus 1, 2, 3, so that's how old I am. But
yeah, like certainly, Excel was at the top of the list, and the way you used it, like again, the VLOOKUPs and the macros and things like that were different. But you know, I think what I find myself still in is the suite of syndicated products that every agency kind of makes an investment in. The proprietary data that one holding company might have, and then, you know, the applications that you kind of get your hands on that maybe tell a story or can predict the future a little bit. So things like ComScore and Nielsen, Simmons MRI.
those are for the data sets, though, right?
Those are from for consumer understanding, really, and then maybe brand competitor understanding. Those were like the main ones. And
what are you using for like forecasting the effectiveness of media plans? Do y'all have an attribution model, or
so interestingly enough, at BBDO, in my media agency days, like we had teams that like would specifically do that on their own, and we would feed into that or work with them on that. But there's a lot of specialized departments at media agencies that will handle the forecasting and the modeling, whether they do it internally or work with vendor partners. What's interesting about the role at BBDO is, you know, my team is very hands-on with the syndicated data with the first party data that we get, with the creative performance and tracking data that we also have. But we kind of have to outsource a little bit or work with third parties to do some of the predicting and projecting. You know, I tend to kind of like to do things like correlation analyses and things like that, maybe to help not only model impact now, but predict future impact. But that's kind of the extent of it for me. So like we have internal resource at Omnicom that does modeling, that does kind of predictive tool, builds out predictive tools, things like that. I think the interesting challenge has been, because we're not a media agency, right, where we're spending like, you know, you're giving us $100 million to spend, so you better put some scope or some investment in maybe modeling or optimizing, or every media agency kind of has that proprietary tool where you can plan and optimize and all that. And I worked on those things in the past. We don't quite have that, right? So it's almost like, who do we work with, whether it's on the media agency side, the client side, the vendor side, the network side, that can help us do some of the things that are maybe being required, but you know, it's just not a capability that we have at hand. So really working with vendors in some cases to do attribution projects, working with a company called Analect, which is a part of Omnicom, to do some of that as well, especially the predictive modeling piece. We've used tools in the past like market share to kind of predict like revenue, yeah, stuff like that. So it's quite interesting. I think that's the luxury we have these days, is some of the data sets that we get access to at the network level are quite extensive, and they're also quite not, if not real time, quicker than you would imagine, even in the past. So for example, I can get sales data from IRI. I can get web behavior from ComScore. I can create audiences off of these data sets that are refreshed, every month or every quarter in some cases. So that said, you're able to start to take that data and then use that with whomever and however you do it to kind of project things out in a way that like wasn't always possible, right? Like a lot of times you're at the mercy, at least back in the media agency times, of client data sharing or media performance or campaign performance being over with or things like that, right? But the fact that we are now getting consumer data on a cadence basis that we're able to do a million things with, I think
changes what you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one more question, because you've given us a good roadmap of how things have evolved from Excel to syndicated partnerships and real-time data delivery, which is a little faster.
Yeah.
What would you have told yourself, in 2005 that now that might have helped some of the folks who are a little bit younger in their career or trying to figure out,
the
analytics role? What would you tell yourself, and what kind of guidance would you give?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the one thing I would love to go back and do is get all the statistical degrees or certifications possible, just so like I can have the ability to program or the ability to do some advanced statistical modeling. And then not so much that maybe I'd be doing it now in some of my roles, but understanding it more. So I'm trying to do that now on my own, and I kind of find things out as I go. I think bigger picture would be to really understand the way media has shifted and was shifting even back then, and what that is going to mean. So if you can get ahead of the curve, so if I was an expert in maybe the ramifications or implications of a Facebook, coming in around that time, and what that might mean for media and advertising and connecting with consumers and those types of things. If I was like a little bit ahead of my time, if I somehow like focus my efforts into like some of that more emerging media or platforms, I think I would have really benefited from that, right? Because then, you're not kind of playing catch up in
Just a
2009,
little more
2010.
forward arbitrage of what
Yeah,
may.
exactly. My two recommendations would be, or maybe three. One would be, what is it you kind of want to accomplish or achieve in your career, even if it's short term to start? Because when I talk to a lot of young folks, what is it that you're hoping to gain in the next 5 years? Like, what would you like to work on? Who would you like to work with? What would you like to get out of it? I think that's important. I didn't have that. So I wish I would have gone back and maybe defined that a little bit more. And then secondly, like, learn as much as you can, get your hands on as many tools, as many processes, get as many certifications or classes under your belt that teach you different things that that your heart desires, because I think you're going to be turning back to them in some way, even if it's just talking about them or understanding them with others at some point in your career, especially if you get into analytics. And then, lastly, I think it's kind of get ahead of the curve and how you
see new ideas.
Yeah. I think personality is a big part of it. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room or the one that's leading every conversation, but having an opinion is important. And I think not just feeling like I only have one part of a role in this process, but really even starting out, hey, I have more to offer than just a sheet of data. Like, I have some ideas and perspectives on things, or my insights are a little bit different than what you might be used to hearing. I think people appreciate, especially senior people, when you're able to do the job, no questions asked, but then you can add a little bit more to it, even if it's like a little bit uncomfortable, or you might not always hit the mark. I think it's appreciated when you can kind of bring that storytelling lens to what you're working on.
Hey, Chris, that was great. You completed your roadmap to revenue interview. So grateful for you to join us.
Awesome.
For the audience, I'm Greg Silverman, CEO and founder of Concentric. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Chris, for his time, and see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.